So we're gonna watch the short film called Jumper. I discovered it and came across it from reading the comments of the Corridor Digital video that's talking about recreating the bullet time effect. This person mentioned that they'd also done it and that Corridor said they were gonna react to this person's video on VFX Artist React. So we'll watch it together, talk about the different like VFX approaches or the filmmaking stuff, or, you know, just kind of like criticism as a filmmaker slash VFX artist. So this film is called Jumper. I want to go through some of this film. I find this film really interesting because it is a small team, and I do find it very ambitious as well of what they tried to do. I believe that they spent maybe about a year making the film, whether that's the shooting, includes the shooting or not. But I think in terms of the VFX stuff, there's definitely an element, and this is not a negative criticism in any way, but it reminds me very much of that 2015, 2016 YouTube era of like action VFX short films. Not action VFX like the Andrew Kramer Video Copilot stuff, but just like Rocket Jump, early Corridor Digital things where they'd make these like 3 to 5 minute shorts, like dubstep guns, things like that, where it's like, it's some kind of action short that has a VFX spin to it, right? It could also be something where it's trying to it's making a short film to learn new methods of filmmaking, practice skills, learn new methods of visual effects, or test new tools and things like that. As far as I know, that I believe that they did use some AI tools for the bullet time part of the short where he gets thrown into the table. They used 45 GoPros that were set up in an arc around this. This is like 45 GoPros or something like that, because the whole thing, it goes all the way around, it comes back, goes all the way around again over to here. One thing you notice, you can't see any of the GoPros, right? So part of that is because they have to paint them out. Even though they probably shot this all in one go, they had to remove the GoPros as well, because the GoPros would be in a circle. If you can see my mouse, they would be in a circle around this, all pointed at this same spot. I do find it interesting though, just as a VFX thing, they pre-scored the legs of the table where it's gonna break, which wasn't cleaned up. There's two ways that you can approach that. One, you stitch together all of the videos first so that you're only working with the frames that you think that you'll need and clean it up. Or two, you clean up 45 different feeds of GoPro footage so that you have clean plates for everything on every single version, right? You're not just removing one GoPro over here and one GoPro here, you're removing an entire array of them. And with this, if you're going through and just painting each one of these, you're gonna have to do that 45 times over the entire span of the shot up until the table gets broken, right? A couple of things I did notice with this as well, because they mentioned about how long it took them to clean things up, is this is where, when I talked another time about this, the standards at which you're held to fix things and clean things up and do them to, in terms of a QC standard and things like that, is very different for online content where you're in control of the final product versus putting something out in a theater or on TV and things. The concepts of, are you making something different or are you making something better? Could you spend that extra time that you would do polishing the last 5% working on another shot and bringing that up to the same level, or do you need to do that polish and things like that? In motion, are people going to notice? Like, if people are noticing problems in the VFX or anything, if people are looking at that, you've got bigger problems going on with your storytelling and the filmmaking. If people are noticing those things, I'm looking at this through the lens of a filmmaker, going literally frame by frame, looking at the VFX. That is very different than a viewer who is watching this in real time. They're looking at what's going on here, right? They're not looking at these things that I'm looking at. Whereas, like, again, on TV and things like that, some people don't care about that stuff. They only notice when it's bad VFX. They don't notice when it's invisible or good VFX, right? YouTube standard doesn't mean anything, but in terms of, like, I know that fixing that is not going to make my story as a film better. People are not really going to be looking at. In motion, that's not going to be something that people are really looking at. They're going to be like, oh, that shot is really cool because it's a bullet time effect. I'm looking at it very, very specifically with a VFX lens in mind. But if you look in areas like this, there's a frame here. You can see a doubling of the hand, because maybe the alignment of the plates was slightly off. They were trying to maybe use a clean plate or whatever, but you can kind of see that things get a little softer. Obviously, again, motion blur and things like that take a factor of that. Stuff like this is a section of the rooftop ceiling that it's trying to fill in, but it leaves it in because it can't differentiate it between these areas. So like, they've spent a lot of time cleaning these things up and going through, and they probably just ran out of time at a certain point. AI tools can only do so much. Again, this might not even be an AI thing. It could just be like a tracked patch that got, left out. Like looking at here as well, like look up here, you can see the mismatch of the beam. AI is just going to be interpolating between the two things, and what might be happening is they might be trying to mask different areas and interpolating them in different ways, because as things are further away, if you think about it from a parallax standpoint, things are further away, they don't move as much. So if this is the focus area and it's very close to the camera, the distance that things are going to move between frames is greater than the distance of something that is further away. So what they might be doing is using multiple different interpolations, both as clean plates and things like that, on the background and then the foreground, and then masking these in. Like what works for the character here might not work for the background over here, right? What works for his leg might not work for this guy's head or whatever. You can see stuff where it's like this, down here, whatever that is, a chair or anything. You can see like, interpolation stuff here where it's like doubling and, warping between the frames and whatnot. So there could be just like, again, misalignment of the GoPros, or one is slightly further back than the other. So when you get from this one to this one, that chair is, a little bit further back. It doesn't blend one to one. It doesn't work as well as you need to. It can also be that thing of using an AI tool to do something like this is kind of like over-engineering what the shot actually needs. Not only doing the interpolation, but they're also trying to clean up things where you might not be able to see this, in certain frames. Like you might only see gaps, like this part in gaps. So they're trying to patch it based on things that you can't even see. Because one thing you might have to do is, if you wanted a clean plate, you'd have to take out half of the GoPros if it's over here, and then you have to do the same from the other angle. But if you don't do it from the exact same position, then your clean plate's kind of ruined, right? I mean, one thing that you would kind of want to do is you kind of want to get into the center, maybe get a 360 camera and do a bracketed exposure of everything without anyone in here, including the table perhaps. You then have like a clean plate of everything around. So you would end up doing that, or you get your main camera and you kind of slowly move around with the focus here or the focus on the background, and you try and just gather as much information as you can in order to paint out the cameras and create your own clean plate and things like that. What probably needed to happen is they probably needed to rotoscope this person off, which they might have even done, but rotoscope the person off, created an entire clean background, and then you're kind of combining the skill of either interpolating or interpolation tools, as well as warping between frames as well. Because like, as we get around here, you can see it gets a little bit crazier. You go from this frame, it gets a little bit smeary in this area. Like you've got a lot of detail here. You got, this is all kind of getting smeary and blurry. And then you go to this next frame and the leg kind of gets lost and like it's see-through, which doesn't really make sense. Fake motion going on here as well. So one of the ways you can tell that this is kind of like fake motion where they're switching between cameras is, one, the cameras aren't moving themselves. They're actually moving the camera in post. The switching between static cameras in post and then warping between them. And then on top of that, because the camera is moving, you're then adding fake motion blur. This part is sharp, which makes sense on the character because that's where the center of the focus is, but it doesn't make sense that the background is moving here, but it's sharp here. Where you get these lines, which you can see from the motion blur, is because the sample rate of the motion blur that they're using wasn't high enough, and therefore you get this kind of stepping effect. You can see it over here as well. You get all of these like wavy lines. It just means that they didn't use enough samples when applying the post motion blur to that. And again, it's not a criticism of people making stuff like this, because no one else really should care about this. No one should really be looking at this stuff to this extent. What I'm trying to say is that if I'm in a VFX review and I was doing this and it was a project that I'm the supervisor of, this is the type of review that I would do with the artist who did this shot. And this is the stuff that we would discuss and go through. This is the QC, quality control, tech check process that we'd go through. And we would literally go through frame by frame like this. We'd go forwards, we'd go backwards, we'd expose the shot up and down. I can't do that because it's a YouTube video. But we would discuss all these things, because this is that 5% that you have to do. It's not just like getting the shot to look good. It's getting it to be as good as you can get it at a technical level too, where you would go through and check the grain, you'd go through and check the motion blur, you go through and check for errors or masking issues or anything like that. Because if the camera was whipping around like that, you wouldn't get these interpolation warpiness on the legs. You wouldn't get things like that. You know, I mean, it's still, I think it's cool that they did this with a GoPro. Like, I would love to do something like this and learn how to do it. Using AI tools for stuff like this is interesting because you're still doing all of the work. You're still doing all of the setup and the pre-production. I mean, again, it's difficult because you wouldn't know until you're basically done with shooting that whether it works or not. You still have to do a lot of prep work and testing, and you know, maybe they didn't do testing, but you know, they had an idea and you have to shoot it, and shooting with like 45 GoPros, it's a lot of GoPros. It's probably not even enough GoPros. The amount of GoPros you would need to go from this frame to this frame is significantly higher than what they had. I don't even think you would realistically be able to get them close enough, and like the only way you would kind of be able to do it really is you'd probably have to stack them vertically and do it that way, and then that's adding a whole new challenge to everything, because then you've got to fill out the width of the frame. You've got to fill, you know, you'd end up with a frame like here and here, and you'd get that center thing. Doing everything you can to kind of handcraft those things to as far as you can go, and then using tools on top of that to smooth it out makes sense, rather than just entirely relying on it to create every single in-between frame. You're gonna have to spend a lot of, like, this is not an easy shot to do, and it's a long shot as well. And figuring all that stuff out, figuring out the timing, which frames you're going to use. Are you going to clean up every frame in between, or are you going to clean up every single frame of every single camera first, or are you going to clean up everything after you've done it? What if the timing changes? I mean, this effect definitely helps hide stuff, but then the leg disappears entirely. This is where what you would do is you would go in and create like kind of clean frames of the legs. Maybe not for every single frame, but like you would take maybe like a side of the leg here and kind of patch it in, and then as you're adding the motion blur, you then motion blur on top of it. You're basically creating like clean plates of the individual elements and then filling in those gaps, and then you can add motion blur on top. The whole goal, not necessarily, but it's like in terms of like a technical fidelity thing when it comes to VFX for films, is that it's not like that every frame are painting, but every frame you should be able to pause on any frame and nothing glaringly stick out. My mantra on a lot of stuff is it doesn't have to be like right, it doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be consistent. That could be consistently wrong, but it has to be consistent, so that if you pause on every frame, nothing is jumping out at you as like, oh, that's really bad, oh, that's whatever. Again, this is just like an interpolation thing. This is what every artist has to deal with. It just needs that next step of cleanup that you would have to do if you're releasing it in a theater. Doesn't really matter for YouTube though. Like, it's kind of, to be honest, would be, I mean, there's some frames where it's like, I would say the frame where the leg like this, that should be fixed. But in terms of like all this other stuff, it's like if you were gonna spend your time, if you had 8 hours a day every day to work on something, how are you going to spend that time? Are you going to spend it just doing these very, you know, pedantic technical fixes, or are you going to try and fix the overarching stuff where you're doing, you know, you see here, like you know, there's this bit up here, and then it jumps, right? It's like, no one's really gonna notice that unless they're doing what I'm doing right now. Even here, right? It's like this background shouldn't dim on these frames. It's just kind of 2 frames that are smearing together. This is that level of like what a senior compositor would do when they would go in. You've got this kind of smeary doubling effect, like this person's leg is disappearing. You've got like the gaps here. You've got the doubling of the hand. You've actually got a tripling of the hand because you've got 3 different frames from 3 different cameras trying to blend together, because on this next frame, it comes to a screeching halt and there's no real motion blur, right? So what's happening is the interpolation is trying to average across 3 frames when it's only got 2 frames to go through. So this middle frame is a generated frame from the interpolation, pulling from those 2 frames. It's doing an okay job in some areas, but where there's like smoke and high levels of detail and a lot of change, like, you know, his legs are all kind of disappearing and things like that, is what would need another pad. Like he's got a double leg and this and that. There's a lot of techniques used throughout this entire short film. We're only like a minute in and there's so many other things to even talk about. A little bit of like a sharp mask here. You can see you got these kind of frames where they're probably just like, they probably shot it for real and then are creating like a clean plane around it. But you can see like kind of aliased edges here along this white part. That frame, like I'm not sure what's happening there. See here, the head actually, I think the head disappears. Yeah, the head actually is not there for a couple of frames. Don't rely too much on automated tools in order to be able to do a job. I would definitely say it does enough of a serviceable job that will get you 80% of the way there. But these things, this like last 20%, 10%, 5%, whatever it might be, this I would say is a pretty big error. They, even though, again, no one's really going to notice, but if it's something where it's like, it will just take your work to just a little bit more of a polished level. Because if I was watching this and then I paused it, like again, I paused on this frame, I'm like, oh, like what's with the edge? What's this? What's that? But then they've maybe used an automated tool like either RotoBrush or something else like a VTI mat or whatever it might be, or Runway ML's automat or whatever, Switch Lights automat, I don't know. Done that to isolate it and it's missed all this stuff, but they've just ran out of time or they just didn't notice it. So yeah, my assumption is it's motion control where this is the regular shot maybe, and then they've done it again without him in the frame for a clean plate. And then they're kind of cutting him off the other plate and putting him over the clean plate to add stuff. Because then, yeah, the edges suddenly are like perfect. This stuff takes a long time. And so, like, I can only commend them for attempting to do something like this, especially with like bullet time and motion control. The tools that we have now are a lot better than we had then. And the tools we had then are a lot better than what they had in the 90s and the early 2000s. But still, it's still a really, really impressive shot that takes a lot of time. And even if there are things that miss like this and it just slips through and you're just tired and you want to finish the film and you just want to get it out the door, nothing ever is truly finished. It's just released. The enemy of perfect is done or good or something, or the enemy of good is perfection, or whatever the expression is, where it's like you can keep noodling something until it's perfect, but it will never ever be finished if that's the case. Sometimes you just have to kind of kill your darlings and release it and put it out. Does this thing really change the grand scheme of the story that they're trying to tell, the vibe, the mood, the tone, what they were aiming to achieve with this short film? No, it doesn't really change that at all. It's a technical thing that could be fixed. I think that this is a really, really well-made short with a lot of technical proficiency done. Please go check it out. As I said, I'll link the video again in the description, in the chat. Super impressive what they were able to do with a small team.